Nandana Raja Janaranjana Janatira Vanachari Yamnatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamnatira Vanachari Jamnatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gaur Harivo. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Mityam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Hyang Dadati Sabdantikam. Hare Krishna. I have some slides. I think I can show these if I just do a host disabled. Can I share the screen?
Can you try again? Probably I just enabled it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's try this. Oh. Okay. How's that? Do you see Bhagavad-gita there?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to speak this evening on Bhagavad-gita chapter 2, verse number 58. But before starting, I'm going to give a quick overview of the chapter 2, a little summary of the chapter. So the chapter opens with Krishna criticizing Arjuna. In the first chapter, there was a sort of this takes place on the battlefield, and Arjuna was complaining that he didn't want to fight and that he was having to face all of his relatives, and he was dejected because of this situation. So now Bhagavan Krishna says to Arjuna, where has this weakness come from? It's not befitting you, and don't be a coward. It's inappropriate for you. Stand up and give up this faint-heartedness. And Arjuna responds with more complaints, basically. He says, I don't want to kill my grandfather and my guru. I'd rather be a beggar, and I wouldn't want to live if I killed them. Now I'm depressed and confused about my dharma. So this is an important concept. He's confused about his dharma. And throughout the Gita, Krishna explains dharma. This is dharma is a very interesting concept. In India, people sort of think they know what is the meaning of dharma, and many people who study yoga have some idea of the meaning of dharma, but this Vaishnava understanding of dharma is a little more sophisticated, and the introduction to this idea of dharma, there's a transcendental dharma and a let's say a worldly type of dharma. And the transcendental dharma is introduced by Krishna at the end of the Bhagavad Gita. And then there's another book, Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavad Purana that discusses more about transcendental Dharma. But needless to say, the topic of Dharma is very important. So at the end of this slide here, Arjuna says, Krishna, let me be your disciple and tell me what to do. So now Krishna begins this, what happened? Krishna begins this section on Sankhya. This is going forward by itself. So Sankhya is when one identifies with the soul. The soul is the highest principle in the world. And Krishna says that he's criticizing Arjuna. Again, he says, you speak wisely about Dharma, because in the first chapter, Arjuna was saying some intelligent things regarding Dharma, but you're grieving something not worthy of grief. That means that Arjuna was grieving the body. So here Krishna is hinting that there's another kind of Dharma. And then he starts to emphasize the nature of the soul. The learned lament for neither the living nor the dead. And Arjuna, I've always existed, so have you and all these kings. Always existed indicates that as soul, as eternal soul, we've all existed. We are all eternal souls and we'll never cease to be. As a person passes through childhood, youth, and old age, so does the same conscious being, same soul, pass into another body. And the truly wise are not disturbed by such passing. Now, there's a dynamic between the world and the soul. The soul is captured here in the world. Sense contact is neither permanent nor real. Now, that's a very provocative concept. External stimuli causes cold, heat, happiness, and suffering, but these come and go, and you must tolerate them. Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. The discerning person, unaffected by such stimuli, is effectively liberated. Sense contact is impermanent and not real. The permanent soul is real. The consciousness that pervades the body is indestructible. No one can destroy the soul. The immortal soul, imperishable and immeasurable, inhabits a temporary mortal body. Therefore, fight, Arjuna. So this is an interesting concept that the soul is encapsulated, or it's imprisoned in this world. And part of the way that one achieves liberation is to do one's duty, to act according to one's nature. But even though one's nature may seem to bind one to the world, nevertheless, by acting according to one's external material nature and directing one's, you could say, consciousness or intelligence or discernment, discrimination toward the soul, towards spirituality. That's the teaching of the Gita. Krishna goes on to say, Arjuna, the soul is untouched. The soul doesn't kill, neither does it die. It's unborn and eternal. It's not slain when the body is slain. How can someone kill? The soul is indestructible. Whom does a person kill? One discards worn out clothes and acquires new ones. Like this, the soul abandons one body in exchange for a new one. The soul's untouched by weapons, fire, water, and wind. It's everlasting, omnipresent, unchangeable, immovable, and primeval. You shouldn't grieve for the soul. If you understand the nature of the soul, you shouldn't grieve. Even if you think the self takes birth and dies, don't grieve. For one who's taken birth, death is certain, and for one who's died, rebirth is certain. Since this process is inevitable, don't grieve. All bodies are born, remain for a while, then die. What's lamentable about that? People marvel at seeing, speaking about, or hearing of the self, but no one truly knows it. An eternal, indestructible soul dwells within all bodies. For a warrior, nothing is greater than a dharmic battle. So consider your dharma, your occupation. So again, this is emphasis on the sort of the dual relationship that one has. One is soul captured in the body. This is different from soul is in this conception in the Vedic Upanishad Bhagavad-gita conception. The soul is different from the soul within the Judeo-Christian tradition. So you have to, those who are sort of, whose perspective is conditioned by the Judeo-Christian perspective, you have to forget that although we're using the same word soul, the definition of the word soul is different. So here the concept is that we are soul, and the soul is not the body at all. It's like water and oil. Oil is one thing, water is another thing. So when they try to mix, they don't really blend. So here Krishna is discussing this external dharma. You have your dharma, your external dharma, but then there's an internal dharma. This he doesn't get into right now, but he says within the context of this Sankhya section of the Gita, I introduced a few slides ago, Sankhya section. There's this material aspect of life, and it's based on occupation. So for a warrior, nothing's greater than a dharmic battle, and such a fight opens the doors of the celestial realm. If you don't fight according to dharma, you'll incur sin, and your previously high reputation will diminish. What could be greater misery than that? So consider this. Either you'll die and thus reach the celestial realm, or you'll conquer and enjoy the earth. So get up, fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness, suffering, gain, loss, victory, or defeat. In doing that, you won't incur sin. Now, buddhi, again, it advances. Excuse me. Through buddhi or discernment, one becomes free from the bondage of karma. So buddhi can mean intelligence, it can mean discernment, it can mean consciousness also. So become resolute. Fix your power of discernment in a single direction. Fix your buddhi in a single direction. So discernment of the irresolute is many-branched and out of control. The ignorant are enchanted by elegant language. They execute formulas for power, enjoyment, and high birth. We can see that in the modern community, in the scientific community, and just in general in our modern society. People are addicted to their enjoyments, their accoutrements, and this elegant language that Krishna was speaking of 5,000 years ago. It's just all of the things that we're distracted by. We're distracted by politics, and we're distracted by everything that's on the internet. We're distracted by technology, all of these things. But these are all part of the material condition. So distracted by a myriad of worldly goals, their minds are carried away such that their discernment can't become steadfast. So discernment becomes steadfast, or the buddhi, the intelligence, becomes steadfast. And when I use the word intelligence, I don't mean intelligence quotient. It means the intelligence or the ability to discriminate between matter and spirit, between that which is eternal, the soul, and that which is temporary, the body and all of the things that accompany it. Humanity. Sometimes people feel that the highest that we can achieve is being humans, that we should rise above racism and gender identity and just become human. But in becoming human, we also ignore our spiritual essence. We are not humans. We are spirit. And sometimes we may become something above a human, like a deva, a demigod, or we might become an animal or a plant. So humans, in one sense, humans are not very important. And to act like a human is not, it's not important. If to act like a human, we're going to exploit the world and destroy the world, then what's the point of being human? So we should be soul. We should identify as soul. So Krishna says, be free from acquisition and security, become fixed in the truth and focused on the self. A lake serves all purposes of a well. Similarly, one who knows the Supreme grasps the essence of the Vedas or science. Karma. Karma also, in the modern sort of pop context, people don't fully understand this word karma. Karma is associated with one's occupation. It's not that karma, in some insignificant sense, karma is maybe giving $1 to a homeless person and maybe getting some result from that. But that's a very insignificant understanding of karma. Karma is connected with our occupation. And when we do our occupation according to Dharma, which means according to principle, if our approach to our occupation, our life's work, is principled, then that means that we're accumulating, you could say, we're acting with good karma. If it's not principled, then bad karma. So just what does principled mean, or what does dharmic mean? That is discussed in the Bhagavad-gita. So karma, you have a right to work, but no rights to the results of work. Oh, this is such a radical concept. We have the right to work, but no rights to the results of work. So people in the modern, especially within the modern, within modern ideologies, let's say, that have emerged over the last 100, 150, 200, 250 years, the human ideologies have focused so much on the results of work that that there's a big concern about who gets the results. Krishna here says that you have the right to work, but no rights to the results of work. You aren't the cause of the results, so don't be attached to them. and don't resort to inaction. That's interesting also. So don't be attached to the results. And then when you get information that says that you have no right to the results, you shouldn't just give up and be depressed that you don't have the right to claim every result. So this concept is a really deep concept, and we can't really understand it so easily just immediately. But the idea that we don't control, or we're not the cause of the results, is really a profound concept. So Krishna's solution to this, solution may not be the right word. His advice then, if in fact this is the case, which he's saying is the case, that we don't have the right to the results of work, he says, work while fixed in yoga, unattached and indifferent to success or failure. That's yoga. The yoga of discernment is far superior to ordinary work. So this is an interesting idea. This is in the section, the buddhi section. So, and as I said, buddhi is intelligence, it's discernment. So these are very abstract concepts. What we normally consider are connected to the mind. So it has nothing to do with work. Working is, one's occupation is generally something in a more practical realm. But here, Krishna is saying the yoga of discernment is far superior to ordinary work. The reason he's saying this is because here in this section, he's introducing work, that discernment, that intellect is directly related to action or work. It means if one acts in pursuit of one's real identity, the soul, and the soul's relation to the Supreme Soul, then that's proper action. That is the yoga of discernment. And that is far superior to ordinary work. So he says, seek shelter in discernment, because those who are attached to the results of their work are misers. So this is basically the average American is attached to the results of their work. One who practices the yoga of discernment is above good and bad acts. So again, practicing the yoga of discernment doesn't just mean yoga of discernment isn't something abstract or mental, or it doesn't just involve some sadhana, or yoga brings to mind like exercises or meditation or something like that. No, yoga of discernment here in this section means action. Action, you could say karma yoga, that's directed toward the soul and the soul's relation to the Supreme Soul. So Krishna says, practice yoga. It's the excellence within work. It's the art of work. The wise, practicing the yoga of discernment and offering the results of their work and sacrifice, become free from suffering. So what is fixed discernment or fixed intelligence, fixed consciousness? When you're unaffected by the onslaught of materialistic science and your discernment is perfect, you've attained yoga. Arjuna said, how would you describe the person whose mind is steady and has achieved perfect discernment? Krishna says one's discernment, one's intelligence is steady when one gives up the mind's desires and turns the mind inward to the self, becomes unaffected by misery, devoid of desire for pleasure, and free from passion, fear, and anger, and withdraws the senses from their objects, like a turtle draws in its limbs. So this is verse 58. That's the verse that we're going to discuss in just 2 more minutes. So how to steady the discernment? An abstinent person may still have worldly desires, meaning a person who abstains from sense contact. That's the tradition, the sort of Vedic or ancient tradition to become an ascetic or renunciate. So that person may still have worldly desires, but experiencing a higher taste eradicates those desires. One may attempt to control the senses, but they can be forcibly distracted by the mind. But they can forcibly distract the mind. So while restraining them, situate yourself in yoga that's fixed on me. Controlling them in that way, your discernment becomes fixed. So, I thought I had that. All right, let's stop here since we've covered the up to our text here. The rest is a summary of the remaining verses. There's 72 verses in this chapter, and we're on 58. So the remaining slides have to do with the last 10 or so verses. Yada sangharate chayam kurmonganiba sarvasha indriyan indyaratebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. Yada sangharate chayam kurmonganiba sarvasha Indriyan indriyartebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. Sanskrit is a beautiful language. It lends itself to constructing poetry. This is poetry. These are 4 lines of 8 syllables, and they're in this standard meter called shloka meter. Yada sangharate chayam kurmongani basarvasha indriyan indyaratebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. Yada sangharate chayam kurmongani basarvasha indriyan indriyartebhyas tasya pragya pratishtita. So yada means when sangharate cha ayam. Ayang means that this person, or the person being who's under discussion. Krishna is talking about somebody who controls the senses. So ayang, when this person, ayang literally means this. So when this sangharate, when this person sangharate means to withdraw. Here, Prabhupada in the synonym says winds up. It has the sangharate has this sense of withdrawal, withdrawing. So yada sangharate cha ayang. These words are joined together. Cha ayang is actually 2 words. Chayang. Just like when we say don't you want to go? We construct 1 word out of many words. It's an informal thing in English and in most languages, but in Sanskrit there's formal rules for joining words together. So we say, don't you want to go? Do not you want to go? And we make 1 word out of it. Don't you want to go? So that's this euphonic combination. So cha ayang becomes chayang, and kurma anga, what is that? Kurma angani, sort of a kurma angani iva. So iva means like the kurma angani, the limbs of the kurma is the Kurma, we know, those who know about Dashavatar, the 10 incarnations of Vishnu, know this word Kurma means tortoise. So like the tortoise, he's withdrawing. So what is he withdrawing? Indriyani indriyartebhya. This is a long word. Indriyani indriya artebhya. So indriya means senses. Indriyani means sense plural. Ani is the plural, like our S in English. Indriyani means the senses, and indriya artha. Artha means, indicates the sort of the goal. What do the senses connect with? They connect with the sense objects. So indriya artha are the sense objects. So the and when you put that word together, indriyan indriyartebhya, it says that indriyartebhya means from the sense objects. So when you withdraw the senses from the sense objects, the concept is that the senses are magnetized by the sense objects. When we look at something beautiful, we're immediately attracted to it. It's like a magnetic attraction. This is the nature of the world. This is the senses and the sense objects. This is the whole concept of yoga. It's interesting that when people think of yoga, they just think of exercises, but the fundamental concept, the fundamental philosophical concept of yoga and of the Upanishads and Bhagavad-gita, this is the sort of the beginning, starts from this point. It's that the senses and the sense objects are bound together. They're connected like this magnetic attraction, this bondage, one with the other. So our hearing, we're attracted to sound, seeing, we're attracted to beautiful visions, and touch, we're attracted to things, taste, all of these senses, they bind us to the world. So this is a fundamental concept. So where does yoga come in? Where does physical yoga, mental meditation, all these things? Well, those are processes to break this bondage, to counteract this magnetism. So one who withdraws, samharate, all of the indriyani, the senses, from the indriyarthas, the indriyartebhya, from the indriyas, indriyarthas, then tasya pragya pratishtita. So tasya, his pragya, his intelligence or consciousness, or what's another word I mentioned here? Let's see, intelligence, perfect knowledge, introspective knowledge, or consciousness. I put that at the end of the translation here. These are other ways Prabhupada translates the word pragya. So again, the fourth line here in the verse, tasya pragya, his intelligence. You can also say his discernment, his power of discrimination between matter and spirit is pratishtita, is fixed. It's this is formed by pratistha. Stita is from sta, and an English word is stand. That's our word for that's derived from this root stand, and pratishtita means fixed, well situated. So translation, one who is able to withdraw his senses from the sense objects as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. And then I put is firmly fixed in intelligence, perfect knowledge, introspective knowledge. So these are all applicable. Firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. And Prabhupada comments, purport is the name of the comments that Prabhupada gives on this verse. The test of a yogi, a devotee, or self-realized soul is that he is able to control the senses according to his plan. Most people, however, are servants of the senses and are thus directed by the dictation of the senses. That is the answer to the question as to how the yogi is situated. The senses are compared to venomous serpents. They want to act very loosely and without restriction. The yogi or the devotee must be very strong to conquer the serpents, like a snake charmer. He never allows them to act independently. There are many injunctions in the revealed scriptures. Some of them are do nots and some of them are do's. Unless one is able to follow the do's and the do nots, restricting oneself from sense enjoyment, it's not possible to be firmly fixed in Krishna consciousness. The best example set herein is the tortoise. The tortoise can at any moment wind up its senses and exhibit them again at any time for particular purposes. Similarly, the senses of the Krishna conscious persons are used only for some particular purpose in the service of the Lord and are withdrawn otherwise. Arjuna is being taught here to use his senses for the service of the Lord instead of for his own satisfaction. Keeping the senses always in the service of the Lord is the example set by the analogy of the tortoise who keeps the senses within. So the second to the last sentence here is Arjuna is being taught to use his senses for the service of the Lord instead of for his own satisfaction. This is the important item here. This is the yoga. This is bhakti yoga, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, buddhi yoga. This is the yoga that is being taught here in Bhagavad-gita, that we use the senses in service of the Lord rather than for one's own satisfaction. This redirects the focus, one's intelligence or one's power of discernment is redirected from trying to discern between which is good and bad in this world. Prabhupada sometimes talks about the good and the bad in this world. I love his example. He says, it's like wet stool or dry stool. Wet poop, dry poop. So sometimes and maybe not so much in American societies, there's laws against dogs pooping on the road, but in other societies around the world, animals mix freely with humans. We somehow don't like to mix with animals so much, so we restrict them. But when animals mix freely in the human arena, then there's poop here and there. So sometimes people observe, well, the wet poop is, fresh poop is bad and dried poop is good. But the idea is that to discriminate or to discern between these two is like the good and bad of the world. The real discrimination, the real discernment, real intelligence, real consciousness is to direct one's attention towards the soul, and towards spiritual life, and toward connecting the soul with the Supreme. It's not that we're just meditating on the soul and divorcing ourselves from the world, that's not possible. We have to connect with something. Here, the world is so full of variety. There's also variety in the spiritual realm. So we have to connect with that variety. And the process for that is Krishna consciousness. So I'll stop here and we can open for discussion. Where is the, how do I do this? No, I don't want to. How do I stop the share? Oh, stop share. Okay. So, questions or comments? Discussion. Oh, I forgot this one here. I have one last slide to show. I like this. I like the colors.
I don't know how much sense this will make. How do we know, when you say taking shelter in discernment, meaning that we go a little beyond the senses, but are we influenced by experience and preferences to be able to make good discernment, to be able to be free from judgment, so to speak, rather than let's call it pure discernment? How do we free ourselves from that?
Free ourselves from, what is it? Judgment, you said?
From judgment rather than discernment. Because, the Bhagavad-gita suggests that we should really withdraw from senses and take shelter in discernment. But it's a little beyond the senses when we're talking about our own values or values that we were raised with, or experiences that led to or events that led to experiences. So how do we know it's pure discernment? I mean, I don't know if it makes sense, because I'm very hung up on being objective, and I think that when we take when we're talking about discernment, we have to consider our own events and experiences and our own values as well.
Well, there's two kinds of discernments. One is that we're discerning what is dharmic in the world, what is proper in our society or in the world. We can't live according to some we can't live according to some ideal Vedic society or something like this. But we can live according to what's principled in this world, what people are identifying as good principles. So that's dharma. That's living within the world as a dharmic person. But there's something higher than that. We shouldn't think that that's everything. That we can't get too distracted also by the idea that living a principled life or making good judgments in life, you use the word judgment, or discriminating, vivek is a word for discrimination or judgment, and buddhi, it also includes those things. But there's a transcendental side to life, which is connecting with the soul. Now, the people we call the impersonalists, there's some spiritual people who don't like to accept the Supreme as a person. But even the impersonalists are interested in connecting with the soul and connecting the soul with the Supreme Soul, the Supreme Brahman, or the totality, the spiritual totality. So that's the goal of spiritual life, regardless of whether it's people who are, their only concern is the soul and the supreme totality, or maybe their concern is some ill-defined divine, or a well-defined person as the supreme. They're all meant to focus one's attention. These various perspectives are very similar in that they seek to become divorced from the world and focused on the spiritual realm. But that doesn't say we should abandon and not be principled. It doesn't say we should abandon our principles, our dharma, our worldly dharma. That's the way the world is maintains balance and order. If nobody is principled, then people will just go around killing each other, stealing from each other. And so, but there has to be that balance. There has to be, and the main dharma, or the main focus, the higher dharma, is more important than the lower dharma. So if there's a conflict between the two, then you have to accept the higher dharma. And so how is this done? We have to study the literature, understand, and take advice from Vaishnavas, from gurus, and so then we can understand. But the idea of these, I noticed that throughout my life, there's been a change in morality. And if you study history, you can see how people have societies are founded on different principles. And everyone thinks in the modern age, people think, oh, we've come to the right place. But in another 20 years or 30 years, it changes. People have different principles. So this sense of outrage that some people express, that if everybody's not on the same page with principles, then it's a little I don't want to, I'm looking for the right word, presumptuous. It's not, it's a little arrogant, actually. One thing I notice is that when I go to England, sometimes you can notice the way other people use language better than you can notice in your own realm. But the British people have this expression. They say, oh, that's civilized. That's civilized. And it's a little condescending. It means that, oh, that's the way we do things in England. That's
funny.
And we have a very offensive, in that when I was young, there was some people use this very offensive statement. They said, some people would say, oh, that's white of you. And I find that very similar. I feel it's, that's civilized, but it's kind of racist. It's kind of based on our set of principles, how we think society should go, or how we think civilization should be. And all of these things are real relative. They'll go out of fashion, or they'll change within 20, 25 years. Even societies that are, whose principles have been unchanged for hundreds of years, still they also undergo change. In the world, there's always change, and it's not possible to be perfect in this world. Krishna says in the Gita, it's not possible to be perfect. We should try to be dharmic in the world, but the real goal is to find our spiritual dharma.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hare Krishna. So there's a kind of a, since nobody's saying much, I'm going to try to say something a little more provocative and see if I can get some objections. Sometimes people complain that in the ancient literatures there's a bias against women, and I feel that more important than the apparent bias against women is the bias against family life. That this is something that people sometimes pick up on within the literature, because in the Judeo-Christian tradition, there's a lot of discussion about bias against women, and within modern society, there's this discussion about bias against women. And that's been going on for whatever, since women's suffrage movement in the early 20th century. I just found something. My grandmother played the violin at some women's suffrage meeting. Anyway, so I come from a long line of feminists. So, but I was thinking that the last couple of years, I've been thinking how, as opposed to the Judeo-Christian literature, the Indian literature, the Puranas and Gita and other literatures, especially the Puranas, in some places they're very anti-family. So you might understand how that could be if there are a lot of renunciants. It's not just anti-women, it's anti-family. So don't you find that provocative? See, I find that more provocative than anti-woman. That this is the basis of society. It's the basis of our whole civilization. Our whole existence is based on families, people getting married, having children, pursuing their goals. Children grow up, they get educated. This is our whole society. So how could you have a scripture, some kind of ideal that's anti-family? So you have to argue this for and against.
Well, I feel a whole lot of things are anti-family. I always felt that family was the basic structure of society. This is what I always call the micro of the macro. And so the tiny concept, and through the family, we understand society and how to behave around it, or how to, what to believe, or but I found much opposition to that. Yeah, if you psychologists say, well, the child, the parents did this and that. I feel that this is, that it's supposed to go against the parents, and so I feel that this is very prevalent. This is not. This is this is going everywhere. And it is slowly eroding our family and family values. That's all I can say. And also, in terms of feminism, the woman feels that liberation is not having children and not having a family, which is, or the reverse, or having a family is everything for a woman. And I think both ends are very, very imbalanced.
Sasha, what do you think? You don't have a family that I know of. How many kids do you have?
None.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Well, raising a child now is a great problem. It has, you can get, really very entangled up with a lot of problems and difficulties. It's also very expensive. And, a whole lot of people don't have the money to raise a child. And I think this is not a recent statistic, but a few years ago, they said that for every child you have, you need $10,000 in things, in doctors, in schools, and toys and things like that. So it's very expensive also.
So what do you say, Sasha?
Yeah, I mean, it is provocative, and I think many, like when you try to preach to someone, like something from Bhagavad-gita, that's what might concern people, that, yeah, you're, that they're afraid when you tell them like that family life, it's not like the most important thing in life or something like that, or because then they ask, so but then what is important? So it's tough, like how to explain that properly.
Well, some people really have a family to escape the isolation they feel in society. They have a family, so now they have a clan. They have someone. They're not lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Gaurav, you have something? You have to get off of mute. You're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying, I don't know if I agree with that statement that, scriptures are against family, because, the whole karma kanda system is, the whole karma kanda is actually based on, like householders giving like lots of donations and, like big sacrifices, like Maharaj Yudhishthir, he did, a lot of sacrifices, and, also like as per the scriptures, like women are not supposed to be renunciant. So so I think it just follows that uh, that injunctions against family life, it's probably meant for few men who actually who are not uh, who can grow spiritually for being renunciant. So I think it's not for everybody. So I don't know. I think you know I don't know if there is like a blanket statement against family life. And I think in Bhagavad-gita, that verse which says one who suppresses his senses externally while internally thinking of sense gratification, it condemns that person. So it says better is to do, like a regulated, follow like a regulated, better to do one's duty in a regulated way than to, suppress the senses externally. So, those were like my thoughts. I don't think like there is like a, like condemnation of family life. I may be wrong, but that's what, I was just in India and there were so many like sacrifices which only like a householder can do. So.
True. But in the Bhagavad Purana, Prahlad is very harsh with his father, Hiranyakashipu. He's talking to his father and he says, well, father, if you're attached to family, and you should go to the forest and worship Vishnu. And that really irritated Hiranyakashipu.
It makes sense. Like Hiranyakashipu, like he was beyond the, like the Grihasthashram is until 50, so probably he was, like beyond the, he was, I don't know how old he was.
But you can imagine the irony of that Hiranyakashipu really was affectionate toward his son. He was attached to his family, so he loved his son. And his son is sitting on his lap, and his son says, look, father, if you're attached to your family, you better go to the forest. Oh, what a slap in the face. Oh, no wonder Hiranyakashipu was so mad at him. I think Prahlad was a little rude, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Adma, you don't like that?
I think you're raising some interesting points through about the Vedic scriptures, and you're trying to provoke us to think about why the scriptures say what they say. That's what I think, and or evoke within us the get us thinking. So as I think about it, and as I've thought about it before, I think certainly the scriptures, I think there's no question that Dayananda Prabhu's point that the scripture says lots of extremely negative things about household life. I think there's no question that that's a fact. All we need to do is just read a little here, read a little there, and we're going to come across the theme. It's a recurring theme. But then the question is, but why is that? Given that the scripture does provide for all these holy ways of conducting oneself within one's household. So in other words, I'm recognizing Gaura's point. But the thing is, I think we can understand the merits of the emphasis in the scripture on showing the problems or even the horrors of household life, because the tendency of people who want to do what householders want to do, it's the tendency, and what drives them to want to be a householder in the first place is pure sense gratification. and a lack of devotion to God. That's why, and the I forget if it's the last or the second, I think the second to last verse of the seventh chapter of the Bhagavad-gita says that people are born into this world due to, on the one hand, desire to be like Krishna, but also envy of Krishna. So that's why we're here in the first place. That's why we're here in the material world. And the material world, it only exists. What makes the world exist? Well, the subtle reason for this material world existing is that the world exists to fulfill and reflect the desires of all the people in this world who wanted to leave Krishna and explore the material world so they could sort of try to develop their own kingdoms of God for each family and each person.
Sorry. So actually, can you focus on that? Can you put the picture of the speaker up? I'm sorry. Never mind. Go.
I think Dayananda, the way it works is probably whoever is speaking is sort of towards the top of the Zoom windows. So probably people can see, even if I'm not taking over half of your laptop screen, but I'll probably still, everyone can probably still see the speaker. I think that's sort of the default mode that's going on here in Zoom. Is that right, Sasha?
Yeah, just one note, because we keep also spotlight on the speaker's video, because for our live broadcast, we don't want to show like everyone else's video if they don't want to be seen, so we keep it like that. But otherwise, I believe even for Dayananda Prabhu, you should be able to put gallery view. At least you will see everyone's video at the same time. Maybe it won't be as easy to see the currently speaking person, but I mean, there are some yellow lines usually.
I didn't mean to make a big thing up.
Okay, so thank you, Veruda. And so the thing is, that's why so the internal reason why this world exists is to fulfill the desires of people who want to leave Krishna and artificially be like Krishna. And then now that we're here in the world, we have the opportunity to enjoy our senses, expand our families, and all these things. So we're here in the first place. We have our material senses. We have it's all of these things are due to wanting the opposite of Krishna consciousness. So the emphasis of the scripture is be careful, try to stop the ultimate cause of your having left Krishna and being in this material world, which is sense gratification. And the way that people typically play out their desire for sense gratification is they procreate. And so the material world only exists externally because people are procreating and animals are procreating, everyone's procreating. So there's one person and they have their offspring and so forth. So the household life is basically, it's just people procreating, and then they have to get food to eat to feed themselves and their family, and then they have to defend their families and fight with each other. So that's the material world. So that's why the scripture is emphasizing, hey, watch out. The tendency to do what you do in the household life, the reason you're there in household life in the first place is because of not being spiritual. And the tendency, once you're in household life, is to try to do things related to your body, make them as good as possible. Again, that's not spiritual. But then to Dayananda's point, like, is there something wrong with that or not? No, because if you look carefully at the Bhagavad-gita, it's saying whatever, and as Gaurav was recognizing practically, the Bhagavad-gita and the Vedic scripture are encouraging us to not just become renounced and give up your material duties and your household duties, but to do all these things that you would otherwise be doing for your sense gratification, now learn to do them for Krishna. But because the tendency is not to do them for Krishna, that's why the scripture keeps on emphasizing, hey, this is bad, this is bad. Because our tendency to want to do sense gratification, to want to do things related to the material world, life, like our body and our children and our house, it tends to be not spiritual. It tends not to be pure. It tends not to be selfless. So the emphasis in the scripture is, hey, watch out, this isn't a good thing. But it says, but if you do these things, devote it to Krishna, then it becomes really good. And so, okay, that's all I wanted to say. Hope that was helpful, and sorry I was so long-winded.
So we're about to 7 o'clock. Shall we have a little kirtan? Anybody else have something? You want to add something, Miguel? Arvind? Parul?
Thank you, Prabhu. On a lighter vein, I was thinking if you were also talking earlier about how a lot of the societal norms and all of that is changing constantly, right? What is right, what is civilized, what is morality, everything seems to be changing. I wonder if Bhagavad-gita was just ahead of its time in terms of challenging traditional family values and norms, because at least in the big cities and in the West, all of that is under kind of threat and questioning, right? From a different perspective, not necessarily for renunciation or spirituality, but it's gotten to a point where traditional family norms are not even considered, woke if you bring them up these days. So that just crossed my mind.
Yes. But according to Gita and the Puranas, there's a difference between dharma or principles in life, in our external life. And Arjuna talks about dharma, kula dharma. In the first chapter, he says kula dharma and jati dharma. So these are considered to be external aspects to dharma. But in the Bhagavatam, paro dharma, meaning the highest dharma, is bhakti. So we can't, especially in this modern society, as you've mentioned, dharma becomes corrupted, or maybe even non-existent in some sense. But we still have to follow the principles, the external principles, as best we can, but keeping in mind that they're less important than the paro dharma, the higher dharma. And so much so that Krishna says at the end, sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. Just give up all these principles, these ideas. They have to be put aside so that we can focus on our bhakti, the paro dharma. So yeah, there's these, we see that it looks like religion is being diluted, but then in the Bhagavatam, when you read Prahlad and others in the Bhagavatam, they say that religion, it depends on what you mean by religion, by dharma. The second or third verse of the, I think second verse of the Bhagavatam says, dharma parojita kaitavotra paramatsya matsaranam satang, that the Dharma projita kaitava, that this Dharma, which is a cheating Dharma, is being cast aside. So in that concept of cheating Dharma is that it's the Dharma that says that if we're just good in this world, that's enough. That's why people say, why do I need religion? I'm good. That's enough. I'm human. That's enough. I'm a good human. So that's nice. You're a good human. Does that mean you can destroy the planet? It's not enough. You have to go for the higher dharma. So just because somebody's woke or not woke, or somebody likes this flag or that flag, it's not, those are relative considerations. And to be too concerned with those considerations is not very useful. It's better to be overly concerned with the higher dharma, parodharma. In the Bhagavatam, discussion of parodharma, which is bhakti. So that's the teaching that Prabhupada gives, and Krishna also. He's talking sarva dharman parityaja. He says, don't worry about all this. The British are saying, oh, that's very civilized of you. That's very dharmic, according to the English concept. Or that's woke. Oh, that's good. That's woke. Or all these are relative concepts. Even the idea within religion that it's good to be an honest person, or honorable, or a good family person. That's part of the temporary life. So yes, we should have principles. We should be dharmic, but no, we should pursue the higher dharma. Anything else? Is that okay, Arvind Prabhu?
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, that was great.
Okay. So a little chanting. What? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Premanandi, Hari Hari.
Jai. Thank you so much, Dayananda Prabhu. It's a very interesting discussion that you led, and you made really great points that helped us to understand how Krishna is what Krishna is explaining to Arjuna and why he's explaining things the way he is in this chapter. It's extremely interesting. So when we hear you discussing it, then I mean, for me, one of the things I'm thinking about is, wow, there's so much really here. And the more that you start to try to, understand how one point connects to the other and dissect it and understand the implications of the points and so forth. It just seems like the more that you start to get into it, it seems like there's so much more that you could. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it seems like there'd be no end to how you can be fascinated by studying this. And so thanks for making that experience, giving us a taste of that, making it palpable. So if you want to, in the audience or the not the audience, but if the rest of the group, if you want to unmute yourself, you can join me in expressing appreciation for Dayananda Prabhu, our guest speaker, now. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.
Haribo.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Peru. We